All right. Welcome back to the Yoga Well podcast. I'm your host, Chase Bossart. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most important yoga texts. It's called the Bhagavad Gītā. Bhagavad Gītā is part of a much larger story called the Mahabharata, which is a kind of history of the relationships of two sets of cousins that end up in a war over their kingdom. And the Bhagavad Gītā is a particular episode in that much larger story. So in certain regards, in order to understand the teachings of the Bhagavad Gītā, we have to have an understanding of the context of the Mahabharata, and so we can understand what it is that Bhagavad Gītā is conveying. So I'm going to first go through and explain a little bit about Mahabharata, and then I'm going to go into an overview of what all the different teachings of Bhagavad Gītā are and how they flow, so that hopefully at the end of this podcast you have a pretty good understanding of what is Bhagavad Gītā, what is it teaching, why would it be useful for you, why should you study it, etc. like that. Gita means song, and Bhagavad is a realized one. Bhagavad is a person who is considered to be of a very special quality. So the translation of Bhagavad Gītā is the song of the Lord, or the song of the realized one. And it happens as a conversation between two cousins, one of whom happens to be the incarnation of God, and the other one is in a very difficult situation. He's caught between a rock and a hard place, and is just crushed. He does not know how to proceed. In fact, it's so bad that he is thinking it will be better if he himself is killed than if he proceeds with any sort of actions. So, Bhagavad Gītā is really a teaching about how to navigate difficult situations in your life. When you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, and there's a whole pile of crap on top of that, no matter what happens, how do you decide what to do? How do you determine what action should I take, etc.? Bhagavad Gītā is the answer to that. So, let's do a little bit of background so you can see how the story is set up, and then you can really understand who the two partners are in the conversation, and then we'll see what the teaching is. So these two sets of cousins that are warring over their kingdom, one set has 100 cousins. They're called the Kauravas, and the other set has 5 cousins, and they're called the Pandavas. The Pandavas are of divine origin. Each of the 5 Pandavas has as their father a divine being. So the 5 Pandavas are really considered to be the rightful rulers of the kingdom, but through a series of manipulations and cheating, they have lost the control of their kingdom and been banished. Now, they actually go forward with the banishment, and they come back to reclaim their kingdom, and the Kauravas essentially say, no, we're not going to give you your half of the kingdom. We're not going to give you 5 villages. We're not going to give you enough land for 5 pinpricks. That is not going to happen. So the Pandavas have no option other than to fight to reclaim their rightful position in the kingdom. Now, the metaphor for this, is that each of us is a sort of kingdom. And within our minds and emotions, our bodies, are innumerable different personalities and innumerable different voices. Some of these voices we would like to encourage and have them rule the kingdom of ourselves. Some of these voices, they take us down really unpleasant roads, and they really cause us a lot of suffering. The Mahabharata, as a bigger story, is the story of how the two cousins grew up together and the animosities that began, and how they resulted in the kingdom being split, and then how the Kauravas cheated the Pandavas out of their side of the kingdom, and all of the unnecessary humiliations that occurred as part of that. And then when the Pandavas came back to reclaim their half of the kingdom, it was refused, and all of that is the bigger story of the Mahabharata. The reason why it's important is that it provides the background for this being a just war. In other words, this is not simply one side trying to conquer the other side. This is not just somebody thinking, I would like some more jewels and I would like to have some more land. And so I'm going to send my army in there and take it over, and etc. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that the rightful rulers of the kingdom were reduced to first half of the kingdom, and then they lost their kingdom completely, and they are trying to reclaim their rightful place. And returning to the metaphor of ourselves and our lives now, when this happens in our life, and those personalities or those voices that are residing within us that are not helpful, that are really base instincts, and when those things take over and are driving our life, even after we recognize it, it's not so easy to just reclaim and have our positive, and to have our upright, and to have the personalities and voices within us that are really who we want to be. It's not so easy to just have those personalities be reestablished and start driving our life from that position again. It requires a fight. Metaphorically, it requires a lot of effort to reestablish ourselves as who we want to be, who we really essentially are. That's the context of Bhagavad Gītā. Lots of people misinterpret the war by saying, I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in violence. How can a yoga text have as its backdrop a war? And how is it possible that the final teaching of the yoga text is go fight in the war, which is saying go kill your relatives, because the war is between two sets of relatives. So how is it that the yoga text has that as a meaning? And, I don't believe in that. I don't get the Bhagavad Gītā. The explanation for that is, well, in your life, there is lots of stuff that feels like life or death. We get stuck in very difficult situations all the time where we're not sure, should I say this? Should I just quit my job? What's happening in my domestic relationship? This is not okay with me, or whatever it may be. And stuff feels like life or death. So the context of the war is simply providing us a backdrop with enough importance and gravitas that we will see the answer worked for Arjuna. It will work for me, even though I'm not in a literal war. I'm just stuck between a rock and a hard place, etc., like this. So, Mahabharata, the war is inevitable. The two sides go to try to get a bunch of armies as allies, and they end up on the battlefield. And this is where the Bhagavad Gītā begins. Now, the Bhagavad Gītā is a conversation between the third of the 5 brothers, the third of the Pandavas. His name is Arjuna. And his cousin. For a long time I thought that it was his uncle, but actually quite recently I was corrected. It's actually his cousin. But his cousin, Krishna, is God incarnate, although nobody on the battlefield knows that. And God incarnate, Krishna, has decided that he will not participate in the battle because he is related to both sides. And it would be unfair for him to participate. So he made a deal where he offered one side his armies and himself as an advisor to the other side. So they chose Krishna as an advisor, and the Kauravas chose the armies. So Krishna became the charioteer of Arjuna, which means that Krishna is the driver of Arjuna's chariot, and Arjuna is a archer. So he rides in the chariot and fires arrows from where he is riding. As the battle is beginning, they have blown the conches. They have blown the horns, signifying the start of the battle. Arjuna turns to Krishna and asks, "Can you please drive the chariot in between the two armies so that I can survey the two sides that are gathered here to fight?" Krishna agrees, takes the chariot and parks it right in front of two very, very important people in Arjuna's life that are on the opposite side of the battlefield, and says to Arjuna, "Look at everyone that you will be fighting." So Arjuna sees his great uncle and his teacher of warfare standing in front of him. And then he looks and he sees all of his cousins and his brothers and every single male person on the planet that is meaningful to him is there on the battlefield. And he recognizes that by going forward with the battle, some, maybe all, will die. And this realization causes him to be overcome by emotion, and he collapses. Now, there's so much in the details of this that are so important. And this is an overview podcast, so I'm not going to go into very much detail, but I want to say a few things. First of all, Arjuna is the third brother. This is a very hierarchical society. The third brother is supposed to do what the first brother says. So the first brother is the general. He's Yudhishthira. He's the general. It's his job to decide who goes where and what the arrangements are, etc. So Arjuna commanding Krishna to drive the chariot into the middle of the battlefield to look over the two sides is a misstep by Arjuna. And essentially what it is saying is that when we're out of balance, we take on roles and responsibilities that are not ours to take on. So, how do we know that Arjuna is out of balance? How do we know that he lacks equanimity? By his actions. What are his actions? He's taking on a role and a responsibility that is not his. Drive my chariot into the middle so I can see the two sides that are arrayed against, each other, etc. Krishna certainly knows this. Takes him, parks him right in front of the two people that will elicit the biggest emotional response. And what happens? He has an emotional response. And that emotional response triggers a physiological, mental, behavioral response. It is the absolute fantastic example of Panchamaya model of how the human system operates. You have anatomy, physiology, mind, behavior, emotions. All of those things are interconnected, and when one shifts, all the others shift as well. Because we're a whole. W-H-O-L-E. We're a whole. So you can't separate your emotions from your behavior, from what you're thinking about, etc. And Arjuna is a fantastic example of how this operates. What happens? He's out of balance. His emotions are triggered. Then he loses his physical capacities. And the text is really pretty. It's beautiful poetry. It talks about his throat is dry and his hands lose strength and he drops his bow and he collapses, etc. But not only that, his mind also becomes highly agitated and it moves left and right everywhere. And he perceives negative omens. Nothing good is going to come out of this, etc. That's Vijnanamaya. So, it's just beautiful teaching. And this is another thing about Bhagavad Gītā that's really interesting, is that this format is different from, say, Yoga Sutra or Hatha Yoga Pradipika or many other yoga texts, in that it's a story. It's not philosophy laid out A, then B, then C, then D. It's a conversation between people. And in the story, there's huge teachings that are presented in a kind of practical manner, which doesn't happen all that easily in a dry philosophical text. Arjuna has this collapse, and as part of the collapse, he teaches Krishna, if we go forward with this war, here's all the negative things that will happen, and our society will be ruined, and then that will result in the destruction of our social institutions, and even our religion will be affected, and that will affect us in the afterlife, and it will all be our fault, and it will be better if I don't do this, and I just let them kill me. Again, it's a perfect example of when you're out of balance and you have a very stressful situation come up, particularly one that may result in an emotionally difficult result, the mind can take over and make all kinds of arguments about why such and such a thing is not what we should be doing. And the other thing is what we should be doing. It would just be easier if I died. It's perfect. I mean, it's such a good teaching. So, chapter 1 ends with Arjuna collapsing. Chapter 2 begins with Krishna ridiculing Arjuna. What is this? You eunuch! Stand up! You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself. I don't get this. Come on. At which point, Arjuna says, I'm confused. I don't know how to proceed. Please teach me. Please help me. That is so crucially important because it signifies to Krishna, this is not just a coffee shop conversation between two friends. So, if you were in my situation, what would you do? This is teacher-student. This is guru-shishya. This is the guru telling their disciple deep advice. And it's expected that the disciple will follow what is being given. So the tone of Krishna's response changes immediately, and he starts to teach Arjuna. Chapter 2 is full of beautiful, beautiful teachings. And you can spend weeks and months unpacking what they're said. But essentially, what Krishna tells Arjuna is, you have misunderstood. You have avidya. You have not understood life and death. You think that these people can be killed, but their soul cannot be killed. It also seems you think you can keep these people alive. But these bodies are not immortal. They are going to die. It is only a matter of timing. You have misunderstood. A wise person does not behave like you're behaving. There is no response from Arjuna. Because it's a very intellectual argument. It is a very, very intellectual answer. And Arjuna's problem is not intellectual. He's out of balance and he's been emotionally triggered. Rationalizing with him is not going to work. So then Krishna sees that and comes up with a different argument. You are a warrior. This is a just war. Your role and responsibility in life is to participate in just wars. If you lose, heaven awaits. If you win, you gain kingdom. You get that that's a win-win, right? He does not get that. Because again, this is an intellectual argument. And the issue is not argument, is not intellectual. So then Krishna comes back and says, look, there is a state of being where the outcome of situations affects you less. There is a state where your behavior will be highly skilled. That state has to do with you being completely connected within. If you were there, you would not be behaving like this. At which point, Arjuna wakes up and starts participating in the conversation. And he asks, how do you know if you're in this state or not? In other words, the teacher has said something that the student is interested in. The student's attention has turned and is looking now for, how does this apply to my life, etc. Krishna responds, there are two signs: stable clarity, sthiti prajna, and relinquishing, vairagyam. In other words, if you're in this state, your understanding, your clarity about what step you should take will be consistent. It will be relatively stable. It won't be like 1 hour, oh, that's it, I'm never going to talk to him again. And then in the afternoon, well, okay, let's figure it all out and be fine. And we can move forward like this. And then in the evening, some version of, well, there has to be pain. And after there's pain and suffering, then maybe we can talk about what the next steps are, etc. And then you wake up and then the morning after that and you're like, I'm never going to talk to him again. This is not sthiti prajna. Sthiti prajna is, this is what I feel, this is what I know I must do. And even though I don't like it, I see that this is the step. And it stays more or less like that through time. The other aspect, vairagyam, means you're able to let go of the outcome. You're able to let the outcome be what it may be. It doesn't have to be the outcome that you prefer. So then chapter 3 begins. And Arjuna asks, okay, I'm confused. In one regard, you're telling me that the most important thing to do is to get into this state. And the other thing you're telling me to do is fight in this war. Why do I have to do the fight in this war thing? Isn't it enough to just get into the state? Isn't it enough to attain the wisdom? Why do I have to go kill anybody? Krishna comes back and says, there is no possibility of not acting. There is no possibility of avoiding action. Hiding in your closet is an action. Completely avoiding the other person is an action. So, the only question here is not, how do I feel about stuff? The only question is, what do I do about it? And if we're going to talk about what I do about it, we're now talking about motivation. Why am I doing it? So, the major teaching of Bhagavad Gītā is, what is my motivation for doing the things that I do? And how do I find that correct motivation? And this is how it applies to, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't, means I'm screwed. So what do I do? That's why Bhagavad Gītā is so useful and important to us. Because what does it teach us? It teaches us how to find and get clear about the proper motivation, the proper intent. Then, if we follow that, the impact of our actions will be different. And the situation will unfold in ways that are unexpected, which have a impact on us that is less suffering. So, chapters 3 and 4 really explain the nuts and bolts. It's impossible to avoid action. You must take some action. So, how should you act? And basically, Krishna introduces the topic of yajna. Yajna means so many different things. To even address it here is to risk devaluing its teachings. And yajna has a sense of worship or a sense of ritual, a sense of the motivation for why I'm doing something is because my actions are attempting to honor higher power. My actions are attempting to honor source, divinity, whatever it would like to make. So what I'm doing in communicating with someone, or what I'm doing in my action with someone, is the way that I am doing ritual, or is the way that I am doing honoring or worshiping of higher power. So my life becomes the location where my beliefs are expressed. Now, that's not so simple. That's what we were saying earlier about once you discover, oh my word, these aspects of myself that I don't like are driving my behavior. These patterns and emotions that I developed as a child are still controlling my behaviors as an adult. How do I recover from that? How do I return to the essence of who I am and not allow those fears and identities to take over? Chapters 5 and 6. Meditation. Meditation means many things. Part of what happens in meditation is you have to change your state. Part of what happens in meditation is that you have to return towards equanimity. But even this idea of returning towards equanimity and meditating, etc., it takes time. You can't just sit down and have one meditation experience and then all your actions in life become clear. How I should navigate this difficulty or that difficulty, etc. It all just becomes clear. It doesn't happen like that. What happens is a more gradual process. Of course, there are very strong experiences along the way, and those are very meaningful, and they are very helpful, and they change things for us. And the process of turning your life and everything you do into the location where you are honoring the very source of the universe takes a little bit of time. That's chapters 7 through 11, where the process of increasing faith, the process of discerning more and more accurately what is the essential nature of my being and what is not, gets developed. And that culminates for Arjuna in chapter 11 with an experience of the unity of everything, which is such a beautiful promise. It's essentially saying, if you embark on this process of bringing yourself towards equanimity, going inward, trying to discern what your motivations are for your actions, listening, what is the clarity here? Actually following through and implementing that clarity in your life, that the result will be, the experience will be of the underlying unity of everything and how you are part and parcel of that. So Arjuna comes out of that. And there's still 7 more chapters. Again, it's such a beautiful illustration. Things take time. Implementation takes attention and effort. And the last section of Bhagavad Gita is discussing how to do that. Lots of discussion about gunas, which is a discussion about the state of your system and how it's functioning. It's extremely practical. And it comes in the form of a conversation. So things are taught in a way that is somehow a little bit more digestible. So before I conclude, I'd like to leave you with this, a couple of the overarching ideas of Bhagavad Gita. One of them is called Dharma. Dharma is essentially the set of responsibilities, obligations, and rights that are related to a particular position. So, a dharma is the things that you agree to do, as well as the things that you agree not to do, that are related to a particular role that you're playing in your life. And there is a set of results that come from playing that role. So Bhagavad Gita is very, very interested in how do you determine what is the proper role that you should be playing in this particular situation. And that is helpful. That is so helpful. Because we each have innumerable roles. I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and I'm a son, and I'm a brother, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a student, and on and on and on. And what kind of behavior should I be doing in this situation depends on what role am I in right now. And where we get to a lot of difficulties in life is when we have conflicts in our roles. My wife would like something, my daughter would like something else. Is my dharma to my wife, or is my dharma to my daughter? Oh, my family obligation is X, my professional career obligation is Y. And somehow those two are in conflict. What should I be doing? Bhagavad Gita is very, very interested in helping you understand what is your dharma and how do you identify it and carry it out. And Bhagavad Gita uses this difficulty of what is my role and what is my dharma, what is my responsibilities for the foundation of our spiritual practice. And it gives steps. The first step is understand, know who you are. Come to see what it is that is your clarity. From that clarity, relinquish your own preferences about outcome. Take the actions that you know are yours to take, regardless of how you feel about what you think the outcome might be. And if you're able to do this, this is true devotion. This is true bhakti. Doing kirtan, doing all kinds of shows of this and that, and your piety, etc., is not bhakti. True bhakti, true devotion, is you playing your roles and responsibilities in life as they are given to you. And the result of that, if you do that, will be an experiencing of the unity and the depth of what is possible in life. That is what is so stunning about the Bhagavad Gītā. It ties together all these different aspects, and it gives you a spiritual path in your daily life. It's really worth your time and effort to study. Thank you.